So I hereby call the business meeting to order. And we have several things we need to do today, and we have a big crowd, so let's get to it. 3 members of the association passed away last year: Stefano Fenelatea, Pedro Lines, and Lawrence Sandberg. We just have a moment of quiet for that. Stefano. He'd object to something. The election results from this fall are for the 22-23 year will be, the president will be Jane Humphreys, the vice president will be Trevon Logan, and the new trustees will be Yari Elaranta. Pardon? For the coming year. Oh, that's right. That's right. You're right. I'm sorry. I misspoke. There are 2 new fellows of the Economic History Association, and Carlos, and the presidential fellow. There's 3 actually. Martha Olney and Lorena Walsh. We have a special thank you to say this year. Robert Waples is retiring as the book review editor for the entire world. And as I think everybody in the room knows Robert and how much time and effort he's put into the book review over the years. So we've decided to, the board decided to make Robert a lifetime member in recognition of his service. And that's really, it's really ironic that I'm making this announcement, because I was probably the worst person at returning book reviews in the entire association. Oh, Marty was worse? Okay. Yeah. But he kept sending them to me in hopes that one would get reviewed. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the budget. Report the director's budget from Mike.
Okay, so let me start at the actual overall budget here first. So despite a pandemic in the past year, we did pretty well. As you can see, the far right column here is our proposed budget, our actual budget. Okay, our actual budget came, the balance is far greater, almost 10 times what we projected. That's because the gains from our investments were almost $700,000. And I don't ever try and project what those are going to be. So that was a particularly good year. Next year, the proposed budget that was accepted by the board yesterday looks like we'll have about $131,000 balance. The bulk of that is due to, look at these 3 blue highlighted areas here. In the proposed budget, we received a check a few weeks ago for a contribution to the Sokolov Fund in the amount of $125,000. And I'll show you how that impacted that endowment in a little bit, but that's where most of that comes from. So other than revenue side, there was nothing on the expense side that was unusual or unplanned. So our total expenses were a little bit under what we had proposed. So the society is doing very well. And if we look at our investments here right now, our total cash and securities investments are just under $4 million. About $500,000 of that is in cash accounts. And as John will talk about in a minute, we have some plans for how we're going to redo some of our investment accounts. The investment committee and the budget and audit committee made some recommendations that the board accepted yesterday, and I'll let John talk about those. So here's the endowments that I was talking about. We have several prizes that are endowed, and the endowment is here in this far left-hand yellow column. That's the amount that was endowed at the end of the fiscal year. And In green is the amount that we actually need in order to pay these out of the endowment funds if we're assuming 4%, which we've been told is the standard that we should be using. So the red numbers there are those that have prize funds that are not quite fully endowed yet. So if you are looking to make a donation to the society and you want to direct it, those are the prize funds that could use some money. The Sokoloff dissertation looks like it's underfunded, but that's because that $710,000 does not include the check that just came in recently, which is in this next fiscal year. So that will be over endowed. Now, it looks like we have a real concern with the coal grants, but in reality, the amount of money that we get from Cambridge each year gives us plenty of money to pay out all of these grants. So the society is not in any kind of dire shape here. What these endowments reflect are donations that have come into the society that were earmarked for specific funds, or if a donation comes in that can be used for anything, then I followed the lead of the last two executive directors and would just allocate that to, whatever fund needed the most money. So that's how those endowment amounts came about. Those were funds that were directed towards specific amounts. And the endowment for the JEH, we don't actually pay anything out from that. So we have $90,000 that has been dedicated to that, but there's nothing that we pay out for that. So that's why it looks like we don't need anything and we just have that money. And then yes, yeah, good question. So 1.4 million is all in those investment accounts. It's a subset of the investments that we just saw before. That's in the Vanguard account. And then finally, the meetings. So let me scroll up to the top here so you can see the meetings. These are for last year's meetings. As you know, last year's meetings were atypical in a lot of ways, one of which was nobody was there. It was completely online. And as a result, we really had no idea what we might get in terms of registrations. So we thought maybe we'd get $5,000. At the time we were putting the budget together, we didn't even know what we'd be charging for a virtual. So we actually did better than normal, partly because we had so few expenses. We didn't have, the biggest expense we usually have is the graduate student initiative, where we support our graduate students for coming. And we didn't have any of those expenses. So we didn't have any of the meal expenses. Typically, the society subsidizes the annual meeting somewhere between $70,000 and $100,000. And so last year, you can see that we came in at about $35,000 subsidy. So less than half of the cheapest meeting we've ever run in the last several years. We don't look to repeat that, though. We are not advocating for virtual meetings that we can spend less money on. I'm just sharing that the hit to our bottom line was actually much less than we anticipated. It didn't cost us as much to run that meeting as we thought it would. And so as a result, we didn't have to subsidize as much. Are there any other questions about the budget? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Oh, that I do not know. You would have to talk to Jeremy about anything that has to do with the technology for the meetings. So last year, I'm not sure if you're referring to last year or this year, but last year we had very little time to react. So we went with the first thing we could find that could do what we needed done. This year, I don't even want to talk about it because I'm not sure what the details were, but I know that it probably had to be run through the hotel and whatever the University of Arizona could provide for us. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to John.
Great, thank you, Mike. So the next item on the agenda is the meeting coordinators report. I cannot describe to you how much time and effort Jeremy has put into the meeting. We all owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. We still have some rough spots to work out, but I think actually things have gone really well. And we asked Jeremy if he would do this, and he agreed. And I'm really glad he did. Thank you, Jeremy.
So, funny thing you mentioned hiccups. We just had one, and that's why I went out and made a phone call. So now we actually have people on Zoom coming in. So I'm sorry, this is the report that they have to see first. But if they have questions for Mike, Mike can definitely answer those questions. I'll actually start with answering your question about what can we do to improve, what's the next level up from what we paid. We could spend $50,000 more and it would be marginally better. This is about as best as you can do with hybrid meetings. You can spend a lot more money and it would look fancier, but we'd still probably have the same sort of technical hiccups. I did look into it. It was very expensive, and I felt like this was the best possible option. So we'll try to smooth out the details if we get more of that. So, but just a real quick report from this year. We did have 279 registrants this year. That does include virtual, but we've had about 150 people sign up for in person. We've probably had a handful of people. Yeah. We have had a handful of people drop at the last minute, thanks primarily due to some weather difficulties. And then also, of course, COVID has always sort of bitten some people at the very last minute. So anyway, in terms of this year, we actually will come under budget than what I proposed, just because I just planned for 200 or so to be here just in case. So we should come under that budget pretty well. For 2022, we will be in La Crosse with Mike as the local arrangements. And those dates are September 16th to September 18th next year. We're back to September, which I'm sure many of you appreciate. Should be quite pleasant actually in La Crosse at that point. So looking forward to it. We will then be in 2023. We'll be in Pittsburgh. I can give you the dates at some point down the road, but if you want to know now, I can actually give you those dates if you want to email me. Because Pittsburgh was moved from 2020 to 23, and we just approved Sacramento as 2024, and those details are being ironed out right now. The last thing I want to say is I want to say thanks to Yariel Aranta. He doesn't like this kind of thing, but he provided 13 years of service as meetings coordinator. And I want to give him a special thanks and a shout out because he ironed the way for a very easy transition into these meetings coordinator. And I want to thank him very much for all his service. Okay, questions or complaints? Yes, Simone. Yes. Space is a lot better in there, but it's also tighter, which makes the COVID spreading out thing more difficult. So that's indeed the case. Any other questions? All right, John.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next item is the JEH report from Dan Bogart.
All right, hello everyone. So the JH, the big headline news is that Vishnu Gupta will be taking over for me as the Eurasian editor starting July 1st next year. So that was decided over the summer. In terms of the journal, we're, I think, doing very well overall. Submissions are quite high and continue to be high. So there's been a trend to rising submissions over the past 4 or 5 years. So right now we seem to be at a new steady state of around 205, 210 submissions per year. And since we publish the same number of articles, that means our acceptance rate has gone down. So the acceptance rate is something like 14% at the moment. So we're becoming a more selective journal. This year we had about, I think it was like 350 referees for those 205 submissions. So basically we have about 1 to 2 new referees for every paper. So we're pretty proud of that. We're drawing on a very diverse set of referees for our papers. We're not going back to the same people all the time. Our topics are diverse in terms of geography, in terms of time period, in terms of the field of economics or history that they fall into. So our most popular topic is political economy, but that only accounts for like 17% of all submissions. And if you take like the second or third most popular topic, it only comes to about a third. So the JH is very diverse in terms of what type of topics show up in terms of submissions. We have had in place the data replication policy where authors, once they get accepted, they have to submit replication files to Open ICPSR. And then once they do that, their paper can then be published. And that system seems to be working, I would say, fairly well. We don't get a lot of complaints either way about it. So it seems to be a good functioning system. And then finally, we have, I think, a good relationship with Cambridge University Press. They are, if you kind of read about what's going on, of course, open access is this big movement. Not your kind of open access, John, or some version of it, I guess, right? Yeah. So anyway, the idea of articles being widely available, and that happens either with the author paying for it or the author's institution paying for that. And there has been a steady rise in the number of papers at the JH that are open access. CUP tells us that this shift to online open access should be relatively revenue neutral for the JH. So we're hopeful that that continues because that's an important source of revenue for the association. So that's all the prepared remarks I had. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Dan. There are a number of decisions that were made by the board yesterday that I want to report to you. We are going to establish a new dissertation fellowship award of $10,000 for work on a dissertation, ongoing work. That'll be granted to a graduate student from a non-economics department. So in history, political science, anthropology, other related fields. So that will be a new award that'll be funded out of the EHA, Cambridge University Press revenue stream. So it's not an endowed award at the moment. The board decided to even up some of the existing prizes and awards. So the Gershon Crown Prize will be moved up to $1,400, which is a $200 increase, and that makes it even with an Evans Award, which had been moved up in the past. And because we got this large donation to the Sokoloff Fund of $125,000, we're going to increase the amounts of the Sokoloff Fellowships by $2,500 a year. Okay. We also got a recommendation from the Investment and Budget Committee. Mary Rogers delivered it yesterday, and Joe Mason and Mary were in the committee. What they did was to recommend a more transparent way for the investment committee to make recommendations to the board about how our assets are allocated. The almost $4 million. It isn't that this has never been not transparent in the sense that there's not been a mystery about it, but Mary and Joe have developed a method based on sort of professional standards for asset management that will give the board a clearer idea of why we're going to move any assets around between accounts, why we're doing it, and it's based on a combination of risk and returns kind of strategy. So it's pretty transparent. I could explain it to you, but then we'd all have to go to sleep. So I know, and I'm really glad for you that you became an economic historian. It's not that boring, but it's not edge of the seat stuff. It's really good. Okay, and so then we also had a recommendation. If it's your money, right? That's right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to step down in just a few minutes. So we also have had a recommendation from the budget committee, which was seconded by the investment committee, that we don't withdraw funds from our investment accounts, basically. But if we were ever to need to, like if Mike wanted to retire in the Caribbean or something, at the moment it only requires one signature, but going forward it will require two signatures. In order to minimize the turnover, when every fifth president-elect, because you become president-elect and then president, and then the three past presidents are on the board of trustees, every fifth president-elect will become the second signee on the account. And what we're trying to do there is, we're not worried about people embezzling, but this is just as a safeguard for how the association runs. The next item is that we, as you know, I think remember, we created a new committee on inclusion, diversity, and equity last year. We staffed the committee this year. It's a 3-member committee and then 3 ex officio members, the president, the executive director, and a trustee. And I think also Lana was sitting in on the meetings. I won't go into any details. Obviously there are concerns, particularly in the time that we are in history, about inclusion, diversity, and equity. And the association is clearly committed to the goal of inclusion, diversity, and equity. But we don't have any data to tell us how inclusive, how diverse, or equitable we are. We have the names of the members, and so what we're going to do, and you'll be hearing about this in the year coming up, is we're going to design a way to elicit information from the members about their own self-reported categories for about 7 different things. Whether we actually do this ourselves through our website or whether we get a third party to collect the information, you'll be getting information about that. The commitment of the association and the board is clearly that this will be private information. It won't be made public. We're not going to. In part, this was stimulated by some researchers at a university who wanted to put gender tags on all the articles in the Journal of Economic History. We will not do that. We're not going to provide the information that we collect will be used within the association. So sometime in the upcoming year, when we get the details figured out about exactly what we're going to use and make sure that we're doing it in a way that's appropriate and legal, you'll be hearing from us, and there will be a survey that everybody will probably go to a website and fill in your information. And then we will both post-date that information, because everybody has a membership number now, and that we'll be able to see how we've been doing in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, and a few other characteristics in the past on our committee assignments and things. And then going forward, we'll track several different things. And the board we did not decide what exactly we're going to use the information for yesterday, but we will be doing that in the future when we get a better handle on what information we have and how we might use it. This is the association is making a really good faith effort to come to grips. This is a really, really tricky topic to deal with. And every meeting we have about it lasts 2 hours and goes, it starts like this and it goes like this. So we were really, really trying to deal with this, and we're going at all due speed, which is not too fast and not too slow. Another sad moment for us that we need to acknowledge Lana Suter. who is, is it 12 years? Ken has been, she's been our web administrator, she's been sort of the administrative director for the association, and her son, Jonathan, has been the web administrator, and they're going to step down this year. The board will find a replacement for her. I know we all deal with Lana in some sense, but some of us get to deal with her a lot more, and she's just been incredible. She's been great. And there's so many little details for the association that one of the things that my colleague Mansur Olson used to call them ankle biters. He used to say it was like ducks biting into your ankles. And there's a lot of things like that. It takes care of so much of that stuff for us so that we don't have to do that. And so, Lana, thank you very much. One of the things that Lana said yesterday at the board meeting about why she didn't plan to have the job this long. And she said, well, the EHA just has so many nice people. And that is true, right? I mean, it is an accomplishment of us as an association that we have been gifted with so many people who are willing to help and accept responsibilities. And that is something that we contribute to by being nice, right? I mean, just literally that is really, really important to our collective life together. It's something that really comes home when you're president, because you see all the different pieces that go into the picture. And there are quite a lot of pieces. We're really blessed with having really good people doing so many things. The last item here is Mike Haupert, whose term is ending next year. And we talked about possible search for a replacement, but Mike indicated that he was willing to serve another 5-year term, and the board accepted his offer. So Mike is going to continue as the executive director for 6 more years. Thank you, Mike. Okie dokie. New business. Does anyone have anything, issues they want to raise, questions they want to do with Price?
I just want to say that when we started out, we didn't have everybody on that.
Online. Oh, right, Lorena.
So now we do, and I wanted to point out that we should mention the women.
I will. That's a really good point to remind me that yeah. They say short-term memory is a problem. And I remembered to do it when I was sitting over there and forgot to do it when I got up here. So the new fellows of the EHA are Ann Carlos, who's a presidential fellow, and Marty Only, who's in the crowd, and Lorena Walsh, who's on the Zoom. Congratulations, Lorena. Great. New business, Mike, Jeremy.
I was remiss in not saying that thank you to Price for arranging Zoom, but most importantly, Cindy Poe, who is actually sort of on screen there, who helped manage every single Zoom link and make sure that she stays on all through the weekend just to make sure this happens. So thank you so much, Cindy and Price.
Okay, so we have reports of affiliated organizations. I think several of the people are not here and not on the Zoom. Naomi Lamro is the American Historical Association. Susan Walcott, are you here, Susan? Is the Cleometrics? She's not here. Okay, Ann, you want to report?
I have a short report from Melissa, who was unable to be here due to a family emergency. She let Cleo enjoy a fun and successful virtual gathering at Chapman this year. We're looking forward to hosting an in-person conference at Vanderbilt from May 19th to May 22nd. EHA members should keep their eyes peeled for a call for papers coming soon.
Great. Thank you. American Council of Learner Societies, David Mitch. Business History Conference, Dick Still is not here and not online. EBHS, Ranjit Dugi, nope. OH, Noel Maurer. No, he's here, but no report. Okay. SSHA, Rich Deckel. MBR, Phil Hoffman.
Okay, I'm the representative of the Board of Trustees. And those of you who participate in summer workshop, many other look at the website, which is redesigned. Know all the stuff that we do. I just want to mention a couple things. One is they make almost all of it is virtual. We will move it back to some in person, depending on what happens. The other thing is, if you participate, particularly in the summer programs, the development of American economics, or anything else, you might talk to program directors you know, and try and see, they're very interested in beyond the usual groups, the usual universities. So if you can bring in younger scholars, people from other universities, try and do them, nominate, all those sorts of things. That'd be something that would be very helpful and very much appreciated.
Great. SSHA, Rich Steckel, it's not here. SIO, Lee Alston. Yep. Yep. Lee's not here.
So Brian Beach took on his responsibilities a year early.
Okay.
The Society for Institutional and Organizational Economics will hold its 2022 conference from June 23rd to June 25th at the University of Toronto. Call for papers hasn't been released yet, but when it is, economic historians are encouraged to submit either individual papers or session proposals. At the 2021 conference, Mr. Dow gave one of the keynote addresses, and numerous economic history papers were presented. At the meeting, the Society bestowed the Eleanor Austrian Lifetime Achievement Award jointly to Abner Bright and Gary Lightcap. And Gary received
IEHA, Yari. Harris, Ellie.
So as you know, the World Congress of Economic History was moved a year later, so it will take place next summer in July in beautiful Paris. I don't think they have to sell anything in that. All the preparations are going really well. We'll probably see even still some more calls for papers sessions. So all the sessions have been selected. But there probably will be some sort of hybrid option too, because we have to remember that this is global economic history Congress, and a lot of people in the developing world might not have still access to vaccines, etc., not being able to come to Paris. But hopefully, as many of you as can come to Paris, and I think we will have a really successful meeting at the beautiful campus from Crosse, new campus in Paris next July. Sorry, I don't remember right off the bat, but the new website will have the dates. Yeah, and McCants is still president, and then Lilian Perez-Hilaire will take over at the time.
Great. Paul Rohde. Pardon? Naomi. Oh, Naomi's here. Hi, Naomi. Would you like to talk about your relationships with the American Historical Association? Or our relationship, either one. Paul's after you on the agenda. You need to come up here so that the Zoomers can hear you.
So we organized this session for, on behalf of this association for this year's meeting. And now it's sort of falling apart because the EHA is insisting on meeting in person. But so we're trying to figure out what Marvis is the other person who is the representative, and we're trying to decide whether to move our session online or not. But it's in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
But otherwise, we just 15 sessions.
Okay.
And get them accepted.
As outgoing Vice President of the Economic History Association, I would like to thank the local arrangements committee. The members are, hold your applause until the end. Chair, Vice Chair, Julie Dorsey, Carl Kitchens, and Melissa.
Yari?
So I have the pleasant task of thanking the program committee. I think we have a wonderful, wonderful program, and it's not very easy to work in COVID-19 environment. So I'd like to thank again who else to the end. Co-chairs Eric Hilt, Howard Goldenhorn, and committee members Kara Dimitruk, Laura Salisbury, Marianne Wanamaker, and Jeremy Lance.
I think the program committee did a really good job, and local arrangements as well. All right, Ann, I'm giving up this burden. So last year, when I was invested as the president, it was virtual. And that's why I hit the gavel so many times to open the meeting, because that was the only time I ever got to do it in anger or in legitimacy. So there it is, Ann.
So my first official task is to declare this meeting adjourned.
I'll take these.
Yes, there's some gravel.